Hey everybody, thanks for visiting my YouTube channel. Here's the place where we discuss the Lord's Recovery Movement of Witnessly, also known as the local church movement. I've taken some time to take a more general, objective, scientific, secular approach to viewing the Lord's Recovery in its group dynamics. In this study, I've learned a lot. My eyes have been open to things I didn't realize as clearly before. This whole experience of doing these videos has been an education because I've had to do research and learn new things. But once you start to get into it and start reading this stuff and start thinking about it, you realize that it's a lot broader than you thought before. The whole idea of behavior control and mind control and group control and the elements of what add up in the extreme to what we might call a cult are actually everywhere. We all can be influenced by a group or even an individual in our life in a way that has the elements of behavior control and mind control in it. Essentially what's happening is that what you're doing or what you're involved in is no longer voluntary. You have the feeling that what you are doing is really not your will. Now, we all have commitments, but the idea that you have no choice in the matter and you cannot leave the group ultimately is false. The elements of what happens in the Lord's recovery, the dynamics of group control, of mind control, of undue influence, can be found in a lot of different places. And it boils down to, I would say now, three things. Number one, you are not being true to your inner voice, to what you really feel inside. Number two, you do not feel like you can scrutinize the question before you. You feel like you have to just accept what somebody else says without question. And the third thing is the idea that ultimately you do not have a choice at all. Now I want to review some of the things I've presented in the past. The first thing I want to do is refer you to some previous episodes that I've made on this subject, specifically of the Lord's recovery being a high control, undue influencing, abusive group. And those would include episode 7, episode 9, episode 11, and episode 14. All those I focus on this idea of the Lord's recovery as a controlling group. So now I want to present some things that I've shown before to just review and give a final impression about this idea. The first thing is the Cult Education Institute's list of the 10 warning signs of a potentially unsafe group or leader. And all you have to do to see these online is Google Cult Education Institute warning signs. And these should be appearing on the video now. If you go through them, it's pretty clear that the Lord's recovery matches all of them. That's a very indicting fact. Absolute authoritarianism without meaningful accountability. That's the Lord's recovery. No tolerance for questions or critical inquiry. Definitely no meaningful financial disclosure regarding budget expenses, such as an independently audited financial statement. We know of the Lord's recovery financial shenanigans in the past. Unreasonable fear about the outside world, such as impending catastrophes, evil conspiracies, and persecutions. The Lord's recovery definitely has a persecution complex. They see evil in places most people don't see it, particularly in anybody that questions them or has a problem with them is automatically evil. There is no legitimate reason to leave. Former followers are always wrong in leaving, negative or even evil. We all know this is true. We've all dealt with this. That's one reason we need these support groups to help us through this, because of what the Lord's recovery put in us with this guilt and fear. Former members often relate the same stories of abuse and reflect a similar pattern of grievances. Just go to localchurchdiscussions.com, go to the Facebook groups that discuss this matter. The complaints repeat over and over and over. There are records, books, news articles, or television programs that document the abuses of the group. Yes, it's all on the internet. It's been going back for years and years and years. Followers feel they can never be good enough. So they have to keep buying books. They have to keep going to trainings. They have to keep forking out the cash. Brother, don't you want to be an overcomer? Let's keep working. So forth and so on. The group leader is always right. Well, that's the Lord's recovery. Witness Lee was the minister of the age. They never disagree with him. They never contradict him. They never question him. They've never corrected him. The group leader is the exclusive means of knowing truth or receiving validation. No other process of discovery is really acceptable or credible. That's them again. They are the highest source of truth. They don't listen to anybody. They don't listen to any correction. Anybody who says they're wrong is automatically evil. So they match up on all of these. They hit the bullseye on all of these. They ring the bell on all of these. The next thing I want to review is the BITE model of group control, mind control, behavior, information, thought, and emotional control. We've seen this before, but if you go through this list and read this, you can see that most of them match up with the Lord's Recovery's behavior. And the last thing I want to show again is the influence continuum from the BITE model, showing the continuum of, on the left, constructive, healthy groups, leaders, relationships, and individuals, and over to the right, destructive, unhealthy groups, leaders, relationships, and individuals. One thing that's important on this diagram is to realize that it's a continuum. That means it's not black and white. Yes, you're a cult. No, you're not a cult at some black and white line. These are all tendencies, characteristics of fallen human nature that cause us to tend to get into these dysfunctional and abusive relationships or groups. So when the Lord's Recovery says, the Christian Research Institute has declared that we're not a cult, so we're not a cult. Well, the important thing is not whether you can label them as something or not. The important thing is what kind of behavior do they have and how bad is it? And in the Lord's Recovery, it's pretty bad, to the point where I would advise against anybody joining them. This is something, I'm not just putting this up for your sake. I'm asking the Lord's Recovery leaders to review these points and ask them, have you ever thought about this? Have you ever really looked at yourself and asked, why do we keep matching up with these characteristics of what's known as an abusive, controlling, destructive group? And have you ever thought that maybe that should tell you something? Why do you have these characteristics? Why do you match up with them? You're doing everything right and you have the perfect model for human society, and yet you've been identified by these scientific methods. Sociologists and psychologists and people that have devoted their lives to studying this are saying you're matching up with this destructive, unhealthy pattern and model, and yet you don't realize it, or you don't care, or you don't think about it. You just think they don't know what they're talking about. You're the exception. It doesn't matter because the Lord's Recovery is so special. It can look like a cult and walk like a cult and quack like a cult, but it doesn't matter. Well, come on, guys. It does mean something. It's time to wake up and grow up and smell the coffee and answer the bell and get it together here. Seriously. I know you guys love what you're in and you value it very much. Well, why let it continue to be in this inferior pattern? Why not improve it? You're stuck in a rut. You're stuck in this loop of not being able to contradict Witness Lee. That's your trap. That's your hell. That's your problem. And again, it's ironic that you claim to be the recovery and you can't even recover yourself because you're resisting the signals that tell you to recover something. Let me again reiterate to those who are listening who wanted a more general view. I don't know how more I'm going to go on with this kind of approach, but I've learned a lot and I appreciate the encouragement to do it. But again, let me say, I said three things. Number one, learn to trust your inner voice again and don't turn that control over to anybody. You control your own life. You make your own decisions. You decide for yourself and don't let anybody rush you or push you or threaten you or intimidate you with your life decisions. You make up your own mind. Number two, feel free to scrutinize anything. Feel free to analyze anything. Don't let anybody tell you, oh, you can't think about this, or that's getting in your mind, or whatever the Lord's Recovery says. You know what I'm talking about. You do your homework, and don't be afraid to do it, and you go with the results. And the third thing bookends the first thing. You make your own decisions. You make your own choices. Don't let anybody control you. I thought I was done with this episode. I had already produced the video and was ready to go and post it. And I took some time to reread Joe Castile's letter and read about her experience and process and her going from being a totally sold out and faithful local church sister and family in just about every way that seemed imaginable to me, to beginning to question it, the Lord's recovery, and began her process of basically deprogramming herself by using her own mind that God gave her to try to answer the questions she had and the things that were bothering her about the movement. Reading it, I saw her struggles with doubt and fear and guilt and confusion, a kind of descent into despair. My heart went out to her, and it was heartbreaking to read because the temptation in that situation is to blame God for those feelings when in fact the other source is the source of them. I've been through that. I've been through the doubts. I've been through the fears. I've been through the accusations, the darkness, the confusion about where is God and what is he saying. I struggle to reassure people not because I have doubts, but because I realize my words can only help people so much. The bottom line of all this really is you have to find the truth for yourself. There reaches a point in your life, in anything you're doing or anything you're learning, that you have to actually figure it out for yourself. You can't trust what somebody else says totally. You have to take everything with a grain of salt, and eventually it does come down from a Christian standpoint to truly knowing God yourself. In a more general way, it comes down to you trusting your inner voice and what you truly believe inside, and not giving in to fear and not giving in to guilt and not giving in to accusation, because those things are destructive. Now, let me just talk about it in the sense of a Christian view. God does not condemn, he does not accuse, he does not beat you over the head, he does not try to scare you, he does not threaten you. His approach is always very positive. He's like a loving parent who always telling us if he needs to correct us, he tells us in a way of you can do better. Let's do better. Let's get back out there and give it another shot. Let's go for it. Come on, you can do it. If he convicts us, it's always specifically. He's always lifting us up. He's always pointing us the right way. He doesn't send us a general sense of dread and guilt and fear. That is absolutely 100% not of God. If you're feeling that, if that's something that's tormenting you, that is not God. That is the enemy. He does not work that way. And the sad part is these groups, like the Lord's Recovery, with their threatening, controlling mindset, actually the enemy uses their words to try to destroy you. Because the enemy is just out to destroy you. But he can use religion as much as he can use anything to try to destroy somebody. And he always has. I mean, I don't think any of us have been killed, martyred directly, but that used to happen all the time with the Catholic Church. And some of those martyrs, when they were being accused, I'm sure part of them was afraid of maybe I am a heretic. Maybe I am going to hell. And so you have to realize that God is love. God is goodness. God is kindness. God does not operate in the realm of accusation and threats and meanness and cruelty and harshness. He does not operate in that sphere. But I can't convince you of that. You have to find that out for yourself. You have to go somewhere to find out what is good and what is true and what is right and what is real in yourself. And it's not going to be easy. But guess what? That's part of life. A lot of people just drift through life and never ask any difficult questions because they are afraid it will be too much of a challenge to do so. So they just accept the status quo. Those of us who have been touched by God and touched by a sense of a deeper purpose can't be satisfied with that. We need deeper, fuller answers. And fortunately, God, our loving Father, gives them to us. I would just say, in these general questions of what's real, what happened in the Lord's recovery, what's going on, is there a God, realize that it has a happy ending. There is a happy ending. One quote I like a lot that was made by John Lennon a long time ago was, in the end, everything will be okay. So if it's not okay, that means it's not the end. And so as we're going through trials and we're going through suffering, realize it's not the end. This is not the way it ends. This is just part of the process. And never give in to despair. Always realize at the end of your rope, at the very end of it all, when you're at rock bottom and you don't think that anybody or anything can help you or anything's real, and it's all crazy and it's all cruel and there is no genuine love, realize when you reach that point and you reach out to God, He will be there. The real God, the loving God, the God that loved you so much, He came and died for you and suffered the pain so that you don't have to suffer that pain. And that's what's real. It's not religion, and it's not some movement, and it's not some ministry, and it's not some recovery. It's just God and His love for you and for others, and all the wonderful things He does as He unfolds that to you in your life. Never let anybody control you. Always maintain control, even if you have to submit to them, if that makes any sense. When I say never let anybody control you, if you get arrested by a police officer, you better kind of give in. But I'm talking about inwardly. I'm talking about in your heart. I'm talking about in your inner being. You don't have to give up control of that. And certainly you don't have to give up control of anything to the blended brothers of the Lord's Recovery or Witness Lee or Watchman Nee or any of those guys. That is just not the way it works. For freedom Christ has set us free. Do not be entangled again in a yoke of bondage. And if the Lord's Recovery trap isn't bondage, I don't know what is. So continue to believe that there is an ultimate good and you can find it. And just take it easy and relax. Try to take it day to day. Take care of the simple things. Take care of your family. Take care of your job. Try to be kind to people and try to find the goodness in life. Because behind it all, the genuine goodness in life is God. It comes from Him. We wouldn't even want goodness, we wouldn't even want love if there wasn't an ultimate source of it. And it is Him, and He is real, and you can know Him, and you don't need the Lord's Recovery to do it. I hope this helps. Thanks for listening. Take care.